All right. Hello, 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 and welcome again to another Prophetic Trans-cestors, Jewish trans voices for the non-dual future. I'm Reuven. I'm your friendly neighborhood trans Jew. The Seattle Trans Jewish Collective just started last year at Trans Pride. It's just at 1 year old. And so to celebrate this month, we've kind of decided to do our first lunch and learn, which has been remarkably popular. I'm probably just going to keep doing it because people are enjoying it and showing up. Um, so basically, it's each Friday throughout June. We've got this one and then one more next Friday. Um, this will be a short presentation. It's roughly 20-30 minutes. There's time afterwards for questions. I don't have to be anywhere for a few hours. So, if folks have questions, I'm not in a rush. Um, and then the chat box is open. Feel free to use it, though I will say once I'm doing the slides and the presentation, I might miss things in the chat box because it's kind of a delicate balance, right? If you push the wrong button, then all of a sudden everything kind of falls apart. So I might miss things in the chat if you have questions, but feel free to also sort of speaking on participation. There's no readings this time, but if you do have a question, pertinent question, or something you wanted to know, just raise your hand or unmute. And also, of course, feel free to use that chat box. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Well, no, I do not wish to share a whiteboard. Aha, there we are. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. So we got another lunch and learn today. Who are we talking about today? So our first time we talked about Rabbi Kalanimus ben Kalanimus, who was a medieval Jewish rabbi and poet and author. Last time we talked about Claude Cahun, who was a visual artist. And this time we're talking about somebody who is actually still with us, which is very nice. I wanted to focus on people who could be at least considered elders or were definitely in history, like our medieval author Kalanimus. But today I want to talk about somebody who's still with us. It's our good friend Auntie Kate Bornstein. Um, so, who is Kate Bornstein? Now, many of you probably already know this name and know some things about Kate because she is a well known trans elder, which makes her delightful to talk about because she's still here at 70. I think she's 75, 76 years old at this point. Um, so, Kate Bornstein was born in 1948. Um, March 15th, I think that's Pisces for those astrology gays out there. She was born to a conservative Jewish middle class family that had both Sephardic and Ashkenazi ancestry. Um, she's an actor, an artist, an author, a playwright, and she does call herself a gender theorist, which I frankly love. I think I might start calling myself that as well. She studied theater at Brown, which is particularly interesting because at the time, Brown only gave degrees to men until 1971, which means that Kate Bornstein and Wendy Carlos are the only two women, trans women, who have degrees from Brown before 1971. Um, and one very interesting thing about Kate Bornstein is she was out as non-binary before we even had the phrase non-binary. She was at the forefront of this movement of insisting that this binary doesn't actually help trans people either. So once Kate graduated from college, now I forgot to mention pronouns. So Kate Bornstein identifies as a non-binary femme and has used she, her, and they, them pronouns for decades at this point. So I'm going to be trying to move back and forth between she, her, and they, them. So once Kate graduated from college, they sort of went on a classic hippie, in that time period, very hippie-minded spiritual meandering where they sort of hitched rides across the country and just hung out with different communities, literally spending time with the Amish and the Baha'i faith. Apparently tried out a few other Jewish things, paganism, all kinds of things in this like trip around after college. I did mean to take BDSM out of there because apparently that doesn't show up till later. So just put a strike through on that one. Um, and ended up, interestingly enough, this is something that many people, if you haven't read her autobiography, you don't know, ended up in the Scientology world for 12 or 13 years. So basically, Kate joins Scientology in 1970 and gets excommunicated in 1982. Literally, this was someone who was keeping L. Ron Hubbard's yacht running and working. That's how close Kate Bornstein was in the early Scientology community. And apparently, Kate says that they were attracted to the idea because in Scientology, they were told that souls have no gender. And as somebody who felt that they were not finding a home spiritually or physically in the binary, this was very appealing to them. Later on, another thing, this is actually a direct quote, you could never get an answer. This is where she's talking about the rabbis of her youth and her father, right? Like, she apparently would ask, is there a heaven? Is there a hell? And she would just get these sort of vague answers. Um, that informed a lot of my reasons for getting into Scientology because they had all the answers. Um, and Kate also speaks greatly about cult behavior and how places that have all the answers often appeal to those of us who feel like we cannot find any answers in life because the answers we're being told they're not real answers. Um, so Kate spent quite a lot of time in Scientology. She stated that her time helped her better recognize the cult like dynamics of gender itself, especially in American society, where if you challenge the status quo, if you fall outside the expectations, you literally risk excommunication or worse. Um, Unfortunately, along the way, what Kate found out was that even though Scientology said that souls do not have gender, L. Ron Hubbard was very much a homophobic and transphobic cis man who believed that deviants of a sexual nature were lower on the spiritual scale. And eventually, those are the kinds of things and some other things that drove her from Scientology. Um, so what happens to a lot of people, and I also love this about Kate because we may be hearing a lot about rapid onset transgenderism, right? For this is a right wing talking point. And what it really is that you can't see the internal journey of this person because Kate went from being a Scientologist on L. Ron Hubbard's yacht to within 5 years being a trans woman in San Francisco mostly with it, working within the lesbian community. Um, and that seems like a very rapid shift. And yet, Kate herself says that she knew she wasn't a boy since she was 4 years old and tried to stand in the wrong line, right? Wrong line. Um, so I also love this very quick flip over that to many people would seem like a rapid choice. And yet, to those of us who understand this, know that that was Kate spending decades trying to squelch the feelings. So Kate arrives in San Francisco at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and stated that it felt very lonely because, right, like she didn't know anyone and everyone's in mourning. And she ended up finding a lot of queer sapphic theater. She basically states that many of these people that were doing performance art theater at the time were the people who gave her sort of her ability to act out her grief and her love and her transness to help her work herself out. So she worked with Holly Hughes, who did some wonderful pieces with titles like The Well of Horniness, or another great one is The Lady Dick. So it's like, it was apparently like a trans femme, but also sort of a noir detective thing, right? She's Kate starts working with the Split Britches troupe, which are specifically sapphic and talking about gender and lesbian identity. She starts working with Annie Sprinkles, who's a famous sexologist and porn performer. Um, and she also starts writing for the gay and lesbian paper and basically kind of puts herself out there into the world of trans and queerness. And when she medically transitions, she realizes woman is not a label that's fitting for me either. I really thought it would, but it's not. Um, and at this part, she begins her performance piece period, where she's often talking about the fact, which we're going to get right into, that these gender labels are not working for her, right? She tried really hard to do one, and then she came out here to San Francisco to try really hard to do another one. And despite trying so hard and doing all the right things, neither of these labels feel right. She gained a lot of ire in not just in the cis community, but in the trans community that was so binary minded back then. People did not like that she was out there saying, I look very femme and I've done all these surgeries that I'm supposed to do, and I still am not feeling it. She got a lot of ire for that. Um, so she begins her performance art period. These are just the labels of some of her performance arts. The two main ones that are really very trans oriented are The Opposite of Sex is Neither, which you can actually find on YouTube. And it's her talking about being openly feminine trans while also completely thinking that this binary minded stuff is nonsense, and how her journey of getting there. Hidden Agenda is actually an amazing piece where she parallels a historical intersex person, Herculine Barbine, who was assigned female at birth, raised in a convent, and actually taught at the convent before she started experiencing gut pain that they found out were undescended testes. And the play is actually very beautiful. It also featured Justin Vivian Bond, who is another well-known trans performer who lives in New York now. I will say my favorite title is Y2K Gender Virus 2000. I love the title of that one. I could not find much about what it is, but I kind of love the title. And of course, Auntie Kate has authored a ton of books. Gender Outlaw was kind of her classic first book. Um, my gender workbook and the new gender workbook are were mind-blowing in the trans book world. So one of the things that Kate talks about, and I understand very much as well, so much of the world wants us to focus on our biographies, right? Cis people like to read about our lives to sometimes to understand us better, but also sometimes to help convince themselves that we are different from them. Sort of being able to put yourself at a distance and say, I'm not like that. And one of the things that the gender workbook did was it said, this is for anyone. We all have gender, and you should spend some time figuring yours out. And then the other thing it did was it was very teenage and young adult oriented in a way that while there was programming and things of that nature, to write a book that specifically could appeal easily to teenagers and young adults and it wasn't a biography, it was exceedingly rare. Even right, like this is 1998, very rare. Even now, you don't see a lot of that kind of thing. And it was an amazing workbook. You literally put notes into it. You worked on it. It had exercises and questions. I still recommend it. And Kate has clearly leaned into this mentorship because the next thing she wrote was Hello Crew World, 101 Alternatives for Suicide. And she has talked very openly about her own struggles with mental health and the fact that her feelings towards suicide, in fact, um, actually changed after she wrote this book. That she had struggled with suicidal ideation, that like in her 30s and 40s, she started to recognize that it was just her brain telling her these things and she didn't want to. She was happy, but also it was still there. And then she says she wrote this book and it basically like exercised the feelings out of her, that it doesn't really arise up anymore. um so and continues to write lovely things. A Queer and Pleasant Danger, her memoir, is also a delightful read. So these quotes that I pulled for Kate are really lovely. I love the idea of her calling herself a traveler, right? If we go back to Avraham, our first Jew, Avraham is called Ha-Ivri. We call Hebrew Ivrit. And it comes from the crossing over. Avraham is the Ivri because he crosses over the river. He crosses over from the land he knew. Um, and that's also a trans metaphor. And so to call herself a traveler actually to me rings very Jewish. Now, I didn't speak a lot about Kate's Judaism in this. Many of the articles you'll see talk about her early experiences with Judaism and how it did not work for her. But the truth is, she has also been a member of Congregation Beit Simcha in New York. Wait, is that the one in New York or Washington, D.C.? She has been a member of synagogues and has contributed to various talks and given drashes. So even though many of the articles you will see talk about her relationship to Judaism when she was younger and sort of eschewed it, it is still actually something that is very clearly important to her. She identifies as a Jew. She goes to synagogue sometimes. Yeah. And so this idea of a traveler, right, to me feels very Jewish as a people who are often constantly in diaspora. And also we are the Ivri. And then this last one is something that when I was younger, this quote pulled me up short, absolutely pulled me up short. And I think it's a really, this and some other things she has been saying for a long time are things that are very pertinent now, that are starting to become more normalized, that the labels we apply to ourselves, they're just there to help us. They're words to help us. They are not the end all and be all of our identity. And that the point is that it's a sign to help us move along in our journey, and that we may not need that label later. It may go away, right? Which is very much like the Talmud. The Talmud keeps our opinions, the rabbinical opinions that don't get accepted. We keep them. And why do we keep them? Because in the future, they may be accepted. Future generations may need those. And so, in the same way, Kate very much pulled me up short because I was trying very hard to be like, okay, this is my label. This is what I'm doing. I guess I have to like wear polo shirts now or something. And no, I don't. The label is there to help me, it's not there to hinder me, it's not there to stop me from being myself. I think what Kate Bornstein's real prophecies for us are that we can never stop discovering. She is in her 70s now and still talking about her changes with her experience of gender. That we should always look beyond the binaries because nothing in nature is a binary. And that the labels are helpful, but that you are not a label. You are far beyond a label. Some other things that she also was talking about that are only starting to really be talked about communally now are things like, what are women only spaces? When you say women only, you're going to have to tell me what you mean by woman only, because am I a woman? I certainly look like one, the most like in her, right? Like Kate's like, I look like one. I consider myself non-binary, like, but also, right? Like I've had these sort like, you have to define when you're excluding who you're excluding. And again, she raised a lot of ire because cis people didn't want to talk about it. And the trans community at the time wanted to kind of slide it under the table, right? If as long as I can present enough, I can get into the space and not raise flags, not rock the boat. And Kate loves rocking the boat. And that's a conversation we're also having now around non-binary spaces, right? Many non-binary spaces are being seen as sort of femme light. And as long as you are assigned female at birth and you're looking sort of more butch, right? Or not even assigned female at birth, like essentially a lot of these spaces, if someone like me showed up that was non-binary, there's going to be a problem. And that's a conversation Kate started having back then. Like, where is the line? Who are you actually excluding and who are you including? And yeah, her insistence that we are more than our biography, her insistence that queer kids also need mentors, right? Like queer mentorship doesn't start when you turn 18 or 21. And that we are much, much more than we know we are. And gender is much, much bigger and more relational than we give it credit. All right, I'm gonna pause myself there and open up the floor for chats. As always, I'll remind you, if you want to support the work, there's multiple ways you can do so. You can always throw a couple of bucks our way. And you can also reach out and see if you want to, help set up tables in an event or come up with ideas or do your own presentation. All right, I'm going to stop my share there and open up the floor. And yeah, I know, right? Getting out of Scientology is just wild. Like, and it was a big thing. They were like fully excommunicated. So like, when she wrote her biography, Queer and Pleasant Danger, one of the reasons she actually wrote it was the hopes that it would yeah, it's not exotic, but for trans people, it is. To be 75 and alive and have beaten cancer and stayed trans and queer and 75, like I was being called a trans elder in Mississippi in my early 30s. My early 30s, mostly because I was out and nobody else was, right? Like we are desperate for elders. Um, so she wrote her biography to actually try and get in touch with her one child who is still in Scientology, who will not speak to her because she is excommunicated. They're called, oh, I can't remember the title, but there's like a particular phrase that's basically like somebody you shouldn't trust, right? Like somebody who's going to undermine your spiritual progress. They literally have a word in Scientology for these people. Subversive person. There it is. Kate is labeled a subversive person by the Church of Scientology, though frankly, she is a subversive person, but was excommunicated. And her daughter and two grandchildren have never had contact with Kate. Not since the like 81. Never met the grandchildren and hasn't had contact with their daughter. And so it's actually like she is very glad she got out, and also like recognize like in their biography there's a lot of talk about like how difficult the damage of that has been. Yeah. And remains, because right, there's a whole ass child that they helped bring into the world that they love that will not talk to them because of Scientology. Yeah. Any questions? Any thoughts? Any statements?
Trying to remember if she did she like write anything on Scientology and her experiences in Scientology in a book format. You might have told that before, but
No,
I
no,
can't
no.
remember.
So she really hasn't. Now, I will say, A Queer and Pleasant Danger does have a fair amount about some of the things that happen, and
Mm-hmm.
she's talked about it in some interviews. Usually, in most of the interviews, because most of them are way more trans and queer centered, it's like
Mm-hmm.
brought up but not really gotten into. There have been a couple of interviews with Scientology people that are more focused on that. But as far as
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware, she's never actually written a book specifically about that. Though A Queer and Pleasant Danger does have like a whole chapter about her time as a lieutenant in the Sea Org. Like
Wow.
literally, yeah, like the naval branch of L. Ron Hubbard's Scientology.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd just be interested in it. I mean, maybe she just wanted to leave that all like behind, but I was just
Yeah.
thinking like that
Well,
would
so
be.
from one of the interviews I read, and this would also make sense. And again, like this is a theme in Kate stuff, so I'm not giving anything away. But like, it seems like at some point Kate realized that L. Ron Hubbard was sort of a grifter who was using a lot of this money to live very comfortably.
Mhm.
Um, and in
Yeah.
one of the interviews, literally said like, um, I could handle all the other things, right? Like I could handle the problems of the Sea Org. I could handle my own like despair and grief at like hiding all of this. But when I found out that L. Ron basically was like embezzling money and shit, because of course he's the top of the branch, right? Like
Yeah.
when Kate found that out, like essentially the thing that I think Kate said in one of the interviews was um like I could handle all the rest of it, but I couldn't handle daddy being a villain. And yeah,
Well,
that's literally
that's a
what
lot
Kate
to
said.
unpack there.
Yeah,
But
no, well, and that's why Kate says that, right? Like Kate recognizes that like much of her
yeah.
getting into Scientology had to do with daddy issues and wanting answers that
Yeah.
her father didn't give her. Um,
Yeah.
right, and I think that realization is like also the big switch, right? Like the realization
Yeah.
this is not working for me at all, and neither are the people I'm around. And I need
Mhm.
to radically shift both who I am and who I'm around. Um, yeah, Kate is very clear about her own sort of kinky and BDSM stuff. It's also in her biography. Um, and definitely talks a fair amount about like, yeah, you know, we all have daddy issues because most of our dads have failed us magnificently. And unfortunately, that means a lot of us looking for other dads in our lives who sometimes also fail us magnificently. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, I don't know, I'm gonna go off on a tangent here. I'm just thinking about like Abrahamic religions too. There's like Big Daddy energy. Like, so if she grew, if they grew up Jewish, it's like there's also
No, there's literally a thing on TikTok where there was like something on TikTok where some like young adult, like early 20s, was basically like, it was just them like with their hands and together in prayer. And they say something like, when you realize that the universe has daddy energy, and so that's what you're praying to. And I'm like, you're this close to just rediscovering Abrahamic crap, buddy.
right, right, right.
um,
So yeah, it's just
but
funny.
yeah, and like that is the struggle a lot of us have with these images of God we're given that are frankly not ever realistic, right? Like
Yeah.
constantly, like if you ever read any rabbi writing about God, like I swear to God, every other paragraph is them going, now when I say outstretched arm of God, you should not believe that I mean a physical literal arm, right? Like over and over they're saying this. When I talk about God's beard, don't believe that God actually has a beard. They do this over and over and over. And yet, that is such the literal embodiment for so many people of the Abrahamic God, this white bearded
Yeah.
dad in the sky that's supposed to punish you when you're bad and reward you when you're good. And it's no wonder people don't want to be involved with that. Um,
Yeah, it's not really the vibe.
no, and it's
But
also such a short-sighted vision of God, frankly. That
right.
yeah, no wonder Kate didn't like it. But also, once Kate found queer Jews, Kate starts going to shul again. Yeah,
Big mood, honestly. Can relate.
true. Amen to that.
Yes.
um, anything else? Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. So I think one of the other things that's really useful about Kate that I love for all of us as trans people, both gender and Jew wise, right? The same kind of thing happens with their gender and their Judaism. They struggle and try to align themselves with the way they're being told it's supposed to be and the way that they see it playing out. And when they realize it's not working, they drop it. But at some point, when they find the people who are doing things joyfully, right? When they find the queer Jews who are enjoying themselves, that this is not a, they talk about so much of their childhood Judaism as a burden. When they find people who are doing things joyfully, when they find people who are enjoying their gender, when they find people who are enjoying their Judaism, that's when Kate starts realizing how much joy that they can also get from gender and Judaism. Um, but yeah, um, thankfully enough, Kate like has a very Jewish soul, and that's one of the reasons I brought Kate up as an example this time because they are somebody who is not as strongly Jewish as some of the other presentations. And yet they are still so very Jewish and not just identifying as Jewish, right? The way they think of the world in many ways rings very Jewish to me. Um, and so despite having this period of well, they're still searching. They're a constant searcher. Despite having that period of sort of meandering searching where they didn't even know what they were searching for, they still found it. They still found it.
I'm going to bring something up. It's sort of, okay, thing one, which is relevant to our presentation because it's about this person. The thing two is not, it's about me. Because I need to talk about me now that you've said that. I know Kate Bornstein on Facebook. I had no idea who she was. She's friends with another queer Jew, and they lived through the AIDS crisis, and they both are very serious about it when they do bring it up. And it is wild because she's funny, and I never thought she was an author or a celebrity or whoever. She's just somebody on Facebook who's funny, and you can tell that she has inside jokes with so many people, and she has such a strong sense. Like, I watched this go down. I had no idea she was this big hot shot, and I'm kind of shocked. And I just want to take this moment to say the author that she is friends with has a really good way of like, she knows a bunch of really big hot shots, but she makes them approachable and fun and friendly. And then you find out these are big, big activists in the world. And it's like, well, now I'm not going to approach you at all. I'm going to hide in my corner. They don't want you to hide in the corner. They want you to talk to them, but I don't because I'm half your age. I have nothing interesting to say except, oh, I've read all of your books.
So
Maybe that's a compliment.
I would say that that last part is your opinion, and that
Okay.
most of these people, especially Kate, and I can 100% assure you of this from Kate, um, Kate is someone who loves hearing from people of all ages, but especially even before they were in their 70s, loved hearing from people younger than them. And it's
Oh,
why they wrote the gender workbook stuff. To them, mentorship of queer and trans younger people, right, is massively important and centered in their life. Um, and so that's why they also know so many people. But that's also why I would say that the only thing that I'm saying is I would definitely feel that's your opinion, is that you wouldn't have anything that Kate would find interesting to say, or that some of those other people might not find interesting to say. Because the
I am
truth
dead
is,
convinced of this.
that's okay. I, you are absolutely entitled to your opinion, and I will also say, knowing Kate, Kate would probably say, "I still want to hear it. I still want
Oh,
to talk to you."
consider a message today. We're talking about you behind your back. You mind?
Bunch of Jews are getting together to talk about you.
Yeah, and we're all half your age, and are you okay? And she's probably like, if it were me, I would laugh and be flattered and want to get to know this person, not out of ego, but oh, what did you say? What else can I provide? And leaving Scientology, God, that's not easy. I watched a documentary on it and just like I sat down and cried. You can maybe call me sensitive, but that's no part of that is easy. It's good that she got out and like
Yeah,
I stood up and started doing something else when you were talking about it because cults they can be hard for me to listen to about, and I'm not going to get into why. But anyway, so thing two, she thinks very Jewishly. Can someone tell me about that? Because I converted when I was 21, and some people don't know that, and I just did, and I've had snide remarks from people, and so I don't talk about it. But I am really worried that I don't think Jewishly, and I have always had a complex about it because,
uh,
like,
I can absolutely reassure you that you think Jewishly.
really?
Well,
Because I'm so convinced that
so
Christianity,
to me, Judaism, right? It's like transness. If
okay.
you weren't interested in thinking Jewishly or being Jewishly, you would have not converted. Just like a cis man is never going to sit there all through teenage years going, God, what would have happened if I was a girl? Would I have been a pretty girl? Would it be nicer to be a girl? What would happen if I were a girl? No cis man is thinking that all the time. That's a trans thought. You're a trans
I was
person if you're,
obsessed with that
and
when I
so
was
it's the
12.
same
Would
with
I grow up to be
Judaism.
handsome? Yeah,
It's the
okay.
same, right? So, like, if you're thinking that much about being Jewish, there is something in Judaism that is drawing you to it, something that is Jewish thought that is drawing you into it. And the more you're in Judaism, because I know this myself, the more you're in Judaism and the more you place it in your life, the more your thoughts become Jewish, right? So like I'm at a point in my life, like I remember in college, I was in like a choir at a Methodist college and I sang
Oh,
lots of Jesus songs. Because
oh,
like I got trips to be in the choir. So you were in the choir, you sang like a couple of Sundays every other month or so, and then you got to go on a big trip, right? I didn't care about Jesus, but I liked singing and I liked the choir and the trips. 10 years later, my choir director contacted me and saying we were going to have like a little get together and he really wanted me to be there and he was excited for me to sing in the tenor or baritone section this time. Um, and when I saw the program, I literally was like, I don't know if I can do this. There's so much Jesus. Because by that point, Judaism had become so much more central in my life. And I had spent more time on it. But like, that's part of it too, just like transness, right? Like, the more we have the lived experience, the more our brain is also part of that lived experience. But there is
can I?
no,
Oh, I'm sorry. I did something. Can I clarify real quick? Are you still
yeah,
there?
I'm still here.
I did something and now, okay, there you are. Weird. Um, and I'm still off camera. Good. Because anyway,
Hmm.
um, I was raised by two Christian atheists, and they allowed me to, here's my backstory. They allowed me to find my own way to religion, and that's good. Good job. Fine. Long story because I was not a Christian atheist, but I wasn't Jewish. And if anyone cares, I'll give you the rundown. But anyway, um, I was surrounded a lot from ages 19 to 2019. So that was whatever, I'm not going to count. It was over 10 years by evangelical Christians, because I too was I was part of a cult, and I stayed there for a really long time, and I got out. I'm alive. The important part is I'm alive, and I'm worried that the thoughts that they trained me to have are still there, and I'm worried that it's not enough, and I don't know how to talk about it. And so anytime anyone says Jewish thinking, I sometimes like sulk for days on end
Mm.
and then go read a bunch of Jewish stuff to reassure myself, or I bring it up, and this is the second time. Yeah, I'm a cult survivor. It had nothing to do with anything. It was totally unrelated to religion, and cults are hard. If you get out, I'm really glad that you're alive. And yeah, that's dark. Sorry for the lack of trigger warning.
Okay. Um,
So what I just said was way more about me being a cult survivor.
okay.
Wow. Okay.
All of that makes a lot of sense.
But
And I'm still like, I can't, right? Like, I can't convince you of anything. But the good
no, this
thing
is
is that
reassuring.
hearing things over and over again from yourself and from people outside of you is how we slowly but surely help reassure ourselves and relearn safety, right? And so it's very like you're still in a place where this is really scary. Like, am I actually being who I want to be? And if I'm not, like, oh God, what am I doing wrong? Um, and also like I said earlier, people don't become Jewish unless there's something in them that is attracted to the way Judaism is in the world and the way Jews are in the world. And if you're already
Mhm.
thinking that way, your brain's already thinking that way. And the more you do it, the more your brain will think that way. And those other thoughts that pop up now and then, because, right, like the paths of our brain are like ruts in a road. The neurons that are activated are the ones that are more likely to just activate again. And that doesn't mean that this myth of willpower that we can control our thoughts and our bodies really is harmful, because these things just show up in our consciousnesses and our minds because our brains are trying to cope and deal. And even when those thoughts show up, right? If like something shows up from your past, you're like, oh no, I don't believe in that anymore. I don't want that. That's not your fault. And it's not you haven't done anything wrong. And it doesn't mean you aren't thinking Jewishly. It just means that there are paths in your brain that sometimes the wheels just kind of go into the rut by accident. But it's not your fault. It's not anything bad. And eventually, what happens is the more you avoid those ruts, the more you find other paths, other places, other parts of the road that don't have the ruts. And it sounds like you're in that part right now, and that's a hard part to be in when you're trying to avoid the ruts that are really kind of embedded in the paths.
I like that metaphor. That helps a lot. It's yeah, at this stage, I consulted a mental health professional who had never worked with a cult survivor, and she was there are some of them who are like really fascinated and it's gross and it's creepy, but no, she was not. She just listened for a little bit and then told me about the treatments she was pursuing, and it worked. And I got very, very upset, like mega upset, because she had training in helping people out of domestic violence situations, and I was very upset at the parallels. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, this is kind of opening up some old wounds, but I like the metaphor of the wheels. And it's been 5 years, and it's going to be. I was in this place for over a decade. The damage is not just going to disappear in 5 years, and I'm unleashing it on all of you guys. And
Hey,
I'm sorry. I
hey,
should have prefaced it with a trigger warning.
it's okay. You don't have to apologize. Also, right, like everyone here can mute. Everyone here has a
Oh,
speaker,
good.
right? Everyone here has a speaker that if they were like, wow, this is not what I can handle listening to, they can walk away or mute, right? Just like you said you did a little bit when I was talking about Kate's time in Scientology. everybody, it is not your job to have to always worry about how your actions impact others. It's important to think of that, but also we also have a part. We can walk away, we can mute, and you're not saying anything that actually is, it might be something that triggers another person, right? But it's also not something that's damaging to say out loud. You saying out loud what has happened to you and what you're dealing with is not damaging. I can only speak for myself, I'll say, but it's certainly not damaging for me. And if it was triggering, that still to me is not damaging. You are not trying to harm anyone by saying your story, right? You're not trying to hurt anyone. And so for me, that doesn't need an apology.
Thank you. It still feels like a bit of an ego trip, but yeah, that helps sort some things out.
Yeah.
If you're interested, check out I'm reading the chat out loud, the what?
Complex PTSD Medicine
Interesting.
Podcast. Cool.
Huh, interesting.
Nice.
That might help a lot. And if I'm going along the track of what they're trying not to say, that's a really fancy word for a cult. And like, that's funny because also gross. When you're in a cult, they use a lot of words to avoid using that word because nobody wants to be in one, right?
Of course.
No, yeah, anyway, so it's been 5 years and today something just popped up and that's okay.
It is okay.
I'm not going back. I don't have to run around telling everyone. It happened and I'm going to be okay.
You are.
Yes, I just wanted to pop in. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to. Am I unmuted? Hello.
We can hear you. Hi.
Hi, I can hear you loud and clear.
I don't know why Hi, okay. Yes, I just dropped that in the chat just because some of the things that you're talking about in terms of complex trauma is, whether you identify with it or not, but it's something that, I'm in recovery from, but just like long-lasting developmental trauma. But one of the topics that podcast talks about is trauma, that basically working with energies and entities and from collective burdens or from being a part of groups, like whether religious organizations or, people, some people are in mobs or, all kinds of types of groups where there is a very clear right and wrong that is given out to people, a very kind of clear framing of how you should think and how you should be. And that podcast basically just talks about that is one of the elements of a very multifaceted and multidimensional approach of addressing some of the things I think that you mentioned. So just giving you that as a little resource that has helped me along my journey, and especially in the way that we were kind of describing, what's ours and what's our truth and what's our real self energy way of being and thinking, and then what's kind of on the periphery and maybe is boiling up, just because those neurons are still there, and how do we kind of navigate that and move with that and heal. So yeah, sending that to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I have to say I'm laughing at myself now because there have also been people when I don't mention it in passing. I'll just say, oh, I joined this really weird group and it's a little complicated. When it does come up, they immediately lean forward for all the details. And it's like, no, people died. I'm not going to swear at you because you're a teenager. So I think of you as a child, but you don't realize what you're doing. And when an adult tries to guess what it was, don't try to guess what it is. Don't do that to me. So anyway.
If I wanted to tell people my stuff, I'll tell people my stuff, if especially if it feels like it's something that's tender, it would be nice if people would let people take their time to open up, but all right. Well, I'm going to
thank you for being patient with me.
Of course. Thanks for being open, right?
Well, all of you can now say that you know a cult survivor. Like that is the energy I do carry forward with me. When it does come up, I want people to understand that you now know a cult survivor. That is important to me. I don't know why, it just is. Okay. So congratulations. today you met a cult survivor.
Yeah. I can assure you, you are not the only one I know.
Same.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes me feel a lot less
Yeah.
lonely.
Yeah.
It's something, it reminds me, when I was in Mississippi, I often would get told both about being Jewish and trans. Oh my God, I've never met one of you before. It's like, no, no, you have. You just didn't know. Like we walk amongst you, like we're there. And it's that same thing, right? Like all kinds of people are out there amongst us. You are certainly not the only person, and you're not the only trans person I know who's a cult survivor. Um, I really thank you for. I'm really glad we could all stay here and be here for you. And I'm really glad you brought it up when you did, because sometimes it can feel unsafe to bring those things up. And sometimes when they do just show up and you can't stop yourself from saying about them, it can also make other people feel uncomfortable or cause judgment or blame feelings. We don't need any of that crap here. We don't need that vibe. We're here to be supportive of each other. We're a community. All right. I will say I've only got a few minutes left because I got to get ready for Pride Shabbat and I still have to like find an outfit.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat tov.
Oh, good Shabbos. Is there anything else anybody else wants to talk about or ask about before we head out?
Do it, because I
I
kind of
just
left
love
you on a
that you
dark
said that,
note.
Kate. Yeah.
Whoops.
Well, you know, it's here for it all, here for it all. But I do want to say that I really loved what you brought about Kate's queer trans Jewish joy, and I think that it's nice. Yeah, it's just nice to be in a space like this. It's nice to hear that and to be reminded of that. I'm definitely gonna like listen to the recording again and
Totally.
yeah, and just be in that energy. So I think this is like just a thank you of like thank you for sharing that energy.
No, every picture I see of her, she always looks like she is just overblown with joy, right? Like I think she is someone who really did like she spent 12 years in Scientology, and when she came out, she was like, you know what? I want to be happy. That's what I want. I want to be happy and I want to make other people happy.
Inspiring energetically for sure. When I heard about their vibe, I was like, that's how I want to go through the world. Like
Right,
that's
that
perfect.
whole vibe. Can I be in my 60s and 70s and have that vibe, please? Like that looks great.
Precisely. Yeah.
Well, all right. I hope you'll have a wonderful Shabbos. If any of y'all are at Pride Shabbat, I hope to see you there. And we'll see you next week.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks for organizing. Good to see
Thank
y'all.
y'all. Bye.
Bye.